Okay, it's time now for Focus. At least 28 Spanish women have been killed at the hands of their partner or ex-partner since January alone. Every day, some 400 complaints are filed at police stations nationwide, while it's thought that 1 in 5 women have already been the victim of physical or sexual violence. Associations and rights groups have had to come up with their own schemes and initiatives to try and buckle this dangerous trend. Marion Gaudin and Sarah Morris in Madrid have this report.
Tenían 31, 38 y 55 años. 3 mujeres han sido asesinadas presuntamente por sus parejas.
The headlines on the main news on Spanish television show the crime scenes. Every week in Spain, at least 1 woman is killed by her partner. The figure is up on last year. Marina Marroquí understands the problem well. She was a victim from the age of 15 until 19.
I did practically everything you shouldn't do in terms of this type of violence, and unfortunately, most women react the same way I did. We don't go to the police, we don't tell anyone about it, we hide the name of the one who hurt us, we just endure and try to survive.
But nowadays, Marina wants to tell other women about her experience. Marina's come to Madrid's book fair to sign copies of her book, That's Not Love.
I think this book might help me to understand what love really is and to learn to spot behaviour that may seem normal in a couple, but which is in reality not normal at all.
We live in a male chauvinist society where women are still worth less than men. It's still too easy for an abuser to get away with his crime because women have been sold the idea of a so-called romantic love, a long-lasting love that overcomes anything.
But this woman, Gloria Vasquez, has a totally different approach to tackling gender violence. She's spent 2 months demonstrating on the square Puerta del Sol in Madrid.
We began with a group of 11 people on a 27-day hunger strike. Then we did another one, 21 days, and a third one, 7 days.
She was backed by several dozen women who all wanted to make their voices heard. To make the government sit up and take notice. They say the state needs to do far more to protect vulnerable women.
There isn't any financial aid to help victims. They don't offer any practical solutions for women to escape the situation. There is no legal aid either. When a woman presses charges, the only thing she is offered is to go to a safe centre with a system that resembles a prison. But she's not the one who's committed a crime.
On the internet, it's easy to find examples of what some women have endured. Every day, about 400 women report violence by a partner to the police. To deal with all those cases, in 2004, special units were introduced in 173 police stations around the country.
Pues se ha comprobado el domicilio.
¿Tenía alguna denuncia anterior o...?
No.
Nada.
No tenía nada, no.
We can't individually protect every woman who reports gender violence, but we try to offer help in relation to the level of risk they face. If a woman is at a low risk, we will remain in contact with her, while when a woman faces an extreme risk, we'll put her under protection 24 hours a day.
Round-the-clock protection is what Carolina's association in the Basque Country offers. She prefers not to show her face to our camera. She's a bodyguard. Last year, she began a completely free service for gender violence victims.
I had the idea for this association when I worked for the police, for public security. I had to treat several cases of abused women and I saw the gaps in the system.
A total of about 10 women bodyguards have joined the project. Men are also welcome. Today, Carolina is meeting a new volunteer, a judo instructor.
¿Qué tal, Iñaki? ¿Cómo ves el tema de la asociación?
Well, because from a professional point of view, I can see that there are a lot of women who are left helpless, who feel alone and abandoned. I can teach them self-defense. I can also train association members who want to learn how to better protect these women.
Often, the women who come to see us do so because they haven't got any kind of court order banning the man from approaching them, because the court refused it.
The associations we spoke to say 540,000 women are currently being abused by their partners in Spain. Feminists are still waiting for the parliament to pass a state pact to fight the problem, promised since last year.
Well, for more on this story, we can speak now live to Eduard Salsas, an associate within the International Dispute Resolution Practice Group, who joins me now on set. Thank you very much for being with us. First of all, what is the Spanish government currently offering in terms of concrete plans to tackle this issue?
Well, back in 2004, there was a law which was passed by the previous government. It was the first of its kind in Europe, and it was 100% focused on gender violence, preventing gender violence. There were 4 main lines of action for this law. The first one was a criminal law line of action. So basically, the law acknowledged that this was a social problem and not an individual problem. And then the law attacked low-intensity violence in particular. So we hear a lot about women murdered by their husbands, but we don't hear that much the low violence, which is the less serious injuries, which are more generalized. The first line of action of this law was precisely to increase the penalties of imprisonment for this kind of low-intensity violence. The second line of action was a prevention action and protection of victims. So there were special shelters put in place. There were special courts put in place to deal with this kind of violence. And the third line of action was education. So there was an education program put in place to prevent and to teach the children, well, that. And the fourth line of action was a kind of fast-track proceedings, divorce proceedings. So women who were attacked or suffered gender violence had a fast-track way to divorce and to start over again somewhere else.
But at this hour, on this Wednesday, in this month, what is the current state of that legislation?
Well, this legislation faced a lot of criticism, and of course, it was the first time in Europe that a law like this was passed. So there are obviously a lot of aspects which should be improved, and they should be improved in light of the Istanbul Convention on Gender Violence. One of the main criticisms was, for example, that the law only covered the violence within a couple, so a husband or an ex-husband or a boyfriend against the women, but did not cover other kind of gender violence, such as violence against a mother, or harassment at work, or sexual harassment in the streets. So the current government is now working in a second law which will implement all these measures provided in the Istanbul Convention, and which should be, again, the first of its kind in Europe in terms of protection of women who suffer gender violence.
It may be hard for you to answer, but we saw in that report that civil society has been very quick to react. Why has the government been so slow in bringing, as you say, it's taken over 10 years to bring this legislation into place?
Well, the 2004 law provided for some resources to put in place and to implement the law. Of course, well, if you look at the dates, 2004, 2008, there was an economic crisis, and Spain was especially affected by this economic crisis. So all the budgets were cut, including the gender violence budget, which was cut by 25%. It is expected that now that things are going better from an economic point of view, more resources will be allocated to the implementation of this law.
And we saw in that focus report that there are roughly 400 cases of domestic violence reported in police stations across the country every day. In your view, is the Spanish police force and the justice system strong enough to cope with this massive number of complaints? Well,
the number may sound massive, and it's far too much, and I agree with you. it's a very small number compared to other European countries. So in Spain, we had the chance to have this social awareness against gender violence, and roughly, as we saw in the documentary, roughly 20% of Spanish women report having suffered some kind of gender violence. This percentage goes up to 40 or 50% in northern countries, because gender violence, we don't need to forget that it's always, or a lot of times, linked to other social problems such as alcohol abuse, etc. And the number is far too high in Spain. It's still lower than in other places. So this is a good point of this law, that the social awareness significantly increased, and there's now I would say it's a social shame for a man to be accused or to be sentenced to imprisonment following gender violence. To come back to your question in terms of resources, of course, the courts are currently not coping as we would wish with all these cases. It's a general problem. It's not a specific problem of gender violence. It's just the legal system, the court system in Spain needs a profound reform, and hopefully this government will put in place this reform and will help the gender violence courts to cope better with all the cases they have.
Edouard Salsas, thank you very much for coming in to talk to us today here on France 24.
Thank you very much.